Hi, I'm Tom. And you're in the jungle with Tom and Tweet. The intro just doesn't sound as good when Tweet's not here. Well, anyways, rub-a-dub-dub. Now just two men left in the tub while two Toms left to wallow in the beezer. The Fantasy Football Fuego semifinals this year were bananas in every sense of the word. Some hearts were broken, some legacies were cemented, and legacy is really the theme of this podcast here. For the two finalists now, Kola J, for the second year in a row he's made the finals. Seb, this is his first finals appearance, and Seb has already done, I think, a lot for his legacy this year in cementing himself as a really upper echelon professional fantasy football player, something that the level of respect that I don't think was given to him in years past. I think he's already cemented that level of respect for years to come. His James Conner pickup at the beginning of the year, in hindsight, was insanely genius. And as were his picks up of Samuels and seemingly 11 other Steelers running backs, at some point, all of them have worked out for him. He has clearly established himself this year, regardless of whether or not he wins the title this year. What's most at stake for Seb this Sunday is actually not Seb himself, but the legitimacy of the league as a whole. Because if Kola J joins the league and wins back-to-back his first 2 years, essentially the entire legitimacy of the other 11 owners in Fantasy Football Fuego has to be in question. If Kola J comes in, proceeds to immediately go back-to-back, he's essentially just pulling down his pants and taking a shit on the fantasy football prowess of the rest of the members of the league. Tom, taking a shit. Tommy, taking a shit. Seb, taking a shit. Fred, taking a shit. Dave-Lo, taking a shit. A-Lo, taking a shit. Brian, taking a shit. Tweed, taking a double Dutch shit. Solas, taking a Costa Rican shit. Louis, taking a shit and leaving it in a bowl next to him as he sleeps. Kola J would be a fantasy god in this league if he wins this weekend. And he would reach an unreachable star that literally the rest of us could never possibly accomplish. Maybe if someone went 3 in a row, but how many more years does this league even go on for 3 in a row to be possible? This isn't like a Jesse Guillen back-to-back where I think a lot of people still don't have respect for Jesse, even though he does have the league titles to show for it. Everyone respects Kola J as a fantasy football player in general, and it respects his football knowledge. He wins this weekend. He's a god. The league is over. So, a lot of pressure on Seb, not for himself, but for the rest of the league. Now, let me take a second to acknowledge the losers of the semifinals. And, I mentioned this podcast a couple weeks ago. It's a mistake that fantasy players and owners and pundits all make every year when we get to the playoffs. It's thinking that what happened in the fantasy football regular season matters in the playoffs. And I would argue this is a flaw in our system. That Tommy scores the most points in the league, has one of the best drafts I've ever seen, and due to 1 week of bad luck, really where 100 times out of 100, everyone in his situation would have started the same lineup, he loses his chance of winning the league. I think it really makes me, as a commissioner, want to rethink the playoff system. I would be interested, and I'm just throwing this out here, I'm just spitballing, I'd be interested in some way seeing 3 weeks of roto playoffs where 6 teams qualify and then you have 3 weeks to build up the most points. I don't think the head-to-head in the playoffs means as much. I think, so many of us put so much time and effort into this league. You want to try to reward the most deserving player. And I just can't help but look at the finals this weekend in some ways, and this is no disrespect at all to the finalists here, but you can't help but think that through the first 14 weeks of the season, Tommy was the most deserving player. And it's a shame to see him not have a chance to win the league in Week 16. As for Tom, I think in a couple months, he'll be able to look back on this season where he started 0-4 and went on really one of the great runs of all time, 8 straight wins to make the semifinals, and think of it as a real accomplishment. But Tom's history precedes him. I'm talking about me in the third person here. Tom's history precedes him. 7 years in the league, now 6 playoff appearances, 5 appearances in the semifinal weekend, 2 finals appearances, this many league titles to show for it. And you could see it in him, and you could see it in Fred. And, as time goes on, I think you're going to start seeing it in guys like Tweak and Tommy and Brian as well. Never winning the league really is starting to wear on them. And, as happy as I am for Seb for making the finals, because, as I said, he really put together a great season. It's hard not to be eaten away a little bit inside at another blown opportunity. Fantasy football, I suck at it. What can I say? You really got to wonder why you guys even take my advice on this podcast. But here I am about to make a finals prediction anyway. I suppose that I should have stuck with this prediction that I made at the beginning of the year. I said back in August that auto-drafted teams have a history of doing inexplicably well in this league. Also has caused some to call for a change in how we auto-draft. Like, maybe we're too nice about auto-drafting, but I don't even think that's legitimate, because Kola J's team is where it is now, not because we drafted him LaShawn McCoy in the first round and Josh Gordon in the 4th round and Sammy Watkins in the 5th round, but because Kola J has been able to manage and make the right moves and picking up Bears D and trading for Chris Carson that have set him up here in the finals, and in my opinion, has set him up to win the finals. I predicted at the beginning of the year Kola J would go back-to-back. I veered off a little bit, but I'm circling back to the prediction now. I think he's going to beat Seb this weekend. It looks like the Saints haven't put up a great week in a month. So to have them home against the Steelers, I think is the matchup that Seb planned for this entire time. I'm just not sure it's going to come to fruition for him. I think everything really rests on that game. If the Saints put up 50 points, Seb's going to win. I don't think the Saints are going to put up 50 points. I hope I'm wrong, because I don't want my legitimacy as a fantasy football owner, or the legitimacy of this league, to be legitimately questioned, but I think that's the direction we're going in. We'll be back next week with Tweak to kind of wrap up the entire season, to talk about potential rule changes or structural changes or new teams in the league. Take a look at that all-important first draft for 2019. I guess I want to leave this fantasy football FIGO season thank you to all you guys for being my friends. This is, for whatever reason, something that we all put way too much time and effort in. So it's important to remember what is actually important, and that's you guys. So I love you all. Thanks for being in the league with me. It'd be nice of you fuckers to let me win it once. Please. I'm begging you. I haven't slept at all since I lost. It's just a disaster.